Good afternoon. This is Katie Bray and Matt Gill with the South Dakota Department of Ed, and welcome to our first of 8 webinars on the Principal Effectiveness Growth Model. I want to make sure one more time that you can hear me. Would somebody unmute and give me some of the slides that you'll see this afternoon on the PowerPoint? Will be slides that many of you, if you've participated in our other trainings, you're going to be familiar with. But we felt like it wouldn't hurt to review some of those pieces that we talked about during the November and the June trainings. But what we really want to focus on today is we have several slides that we've developed with sample principal effectiveness student growth goals. Now that the SBAC data is out, we were able to dig into that, and Barb Hansen really was very helpful with that. I appreciate that. We were able to dig into the data a little bit, and we've developed some sample goals. So we want to be able to get to that today in a timely manner so that we have some time. The other piece that we'd like to be able to do is give you an opportunity to ask questions. And the way we'd like to do that is if you, during the course of our time together over the next 30 minutes or so, have a question, if you would type it in. Matt has access to that, and he'll let me know, and we'll pause at certain slides and try to answer your questions as we go. Hopefully that'll work for us, because we do want you to be able to ask some questions. One of the first slides you'll see, slide number 2, and for those of you that are running the slide just from your computer, rather than through this process, we're on slide number 2, and it's the timeline review. And we just want to make sure everybody understands that this year, the 15-16 school year, you could go with a full implementation. You could implement an alternative system that your district crosswalk to the state model, or you could use this year as a planning, training, and capacity building for full implementation in school year 16 and 17. My experience in working with administrators across the state so far has been that I think the majority of districts are using this as a planning, training, and capacity building year. And then this slide with the June 30th, 2015 gap analysis deadline, I'm pretty sure everybody has submitted their gap analysis to the State Department of Ed. If you haven't, you need to consider that. And then I'm going to skip down a couple of bullets. Of course, we'll have the monthly webinars. This is the first of the monthly webinars. We'll have another one in November and throughout the school year. Full implementation of principal effectiveness will take place in the school year 16-17, and then in the fall of 2017, for the first time, you'll upload your aggregate results, the summative results of the principal effectiveness evaluation to the DOE through the PRF process. And I always emphasize at this point that names are not uploaded with the results. It's aggregate data, and as we've pointed out in our previous trainings, the state is working on a formula so that districts who maybe only have one principal or two principals, that data can't be sifted out. The DOE is very aware of the need that the results, the summative evaluation results, are confidential results. This next slide is the minimum requirement compared to the recommended model. And if you'll bear with us for a second, Matt on his computer is going to pull up that screen so that you can see it better than on my slide. And we'll just give it a second. It's loading up. And again, this is a document we've looked at every training that we've conducted. And go ahead, Matt.
And if you were able to see the PowerPoint but not this, at the bottom you might have to click accept content. And I emailed it to you less than an hour ago too, so you have it, the document too. Just email me if you didn't get this or if you want the PowerPoint as well.
So what the only thing that's really different about this chart than the charts that I shared with you, that we shared with you at the October trainings and the June trainings of this past year, is that I've highlighted and I've gone ahead and put in red what the basic differences are between the minimum requirements and the model recommendations. And so some of the high points of those differences is that in the state minimum requirement is that a principal has to be evaluated on 6 components, one from each of the 6 domains. And the model recommendation is 8 components, one from each of the 6, and 2 of your choice. Both models require a professional practice rating assigned to each of the domains. The only difference between the minimum requirement and the model is that the model already contains the rubrics, the point values, the domain weights, and the professional practice ratings. That's all done for you if you use the model. Both models require that 25% minimum of the principal student growth rating comes from some consideration of the SPI or AMO. And again, today we want to spend some time looking at some sample goals. That was something we really didn't have last year when we did the fall trainings or in June when we did the summer trainings. We just didn't have enough information yet, so we've got some goals there to show you today. And both models require a growth rating based upon teacher evaluations. The model, however, provides a formula involving SLO growth and AMO and SPI growth. And I have a slide for that so that you can once more see how SLO growth is factored and how AMO and SPI growth is factored. But I think the key critical point here is that some consideration of SPI and AMO have to account for 25% of that student growth rating. And then both the minimum and the model require 3 categories of a professional practice rating: below expectations, meets expectations, or an exceeds expectations. Evaluation timeline, in the minimum and the recommended model, a principal or an assistant principal, and I want to emphasize that, principal and assistant principal would have to be evaluated at a minimum once per year in his or her first 4 years of employment. The model recommends 2 to 5 formative reviews over the course of the year. And then for a principal and or assistant principal who's in his or her 5th year of employment or beyond, it's once every other year. That's minimum state requirement, and the model recommends yearly. We've always had the question at every one of our trainings about if a district wanted to do more. A district can always do more. That's your option. You just have to make sure you're doing the minimum, which is the once per year for a principal or an assistant principal in his or her first 4 years, once every other year, principal in his or her 5th year or beyond. And as a district, you can do more than that. And then with regard to plans of assistance, there really is no difference between the minimum requirements and the recommended model. We did have the question during the June training about there being some conflict between codified law and administrative rule in this discussion of plan of assistance. We are currently in conversations with legal, and we will have an answer to that question, and if need be, change administrative rule before the actual implementation year of 15 or 16, 17. But we didn't want you to think we had forgotten that that question had come up, that there might be some difference between administrative rule and what we're saying in the actual model. So if that, for those of you that were at our trainings this summer. Okay. Now give us a second. We're going to get back to the PowerPoint and look to see if we have any questions. And we should be coming back to the PowerPoint, and then Matt can look over at our dialogue screen to see if we have any questions coming in yet. And so far, no questions, but please, we want you to ask questions. We want you to feel free to do that. Once more, you've seen this screen many, many times, but for those of you that remember Dr. Porthon, he used to say it takes 10 times at least for the adult brain to see something and hear something before we finally move it from the clipboard to the hard drive. So we're going to keep putting this screen out in front of you, even though you've seen it multiple times. And this is just a summary of the model. It shows that the 6 domains with a component from each of the 6, you pull those together, a principal is evaluated on each of those domains, earns a professional practice rating. That professional practice rating is combined with a student growth rating. And as you can see in that right column, the student growth rating is a combination of the SLO growth goal and the SPI AMO growth goal. And those 2 ratings together, the growth rating and the professional practice rating, come together for your summative rating of either below expectations, meets expectations, or exceeds expectations. And again, we have some slides later on that will show you how those ratings are calculated. And again, we spent quite a bit of time on that this summer and last fall in our trainings, but we want to review that with you one more time before the day is over. One of the pieces that we've built into this training that we didn't have as clear, I think, over the summer or last fall is the timeline. And after the trainings last fall and this summer, I had a number of administrators who wanted a clearer picture of the timeline. So I've got a narrative here, and I've also got a graphic for you that I think clarifies that timeline a little bit better. So in the phase 1, part of the process, which is the prepare phase, principals and evaluators are trained and oriented to the evaluation system. And ideally, the 2 steps are completed no later than the first month of the school year. I was a principal, and I can tell you, I don't think that a principal has time in the first month of the school year to get that training in. I would recommend that training take place prior to the start of school, maybe in the summer, in the spring before the start of school, but to ask a principal to participate in a training in September, I think is unrealistic. Now, you all have access to the notes for this PowerPoint. I've listed all the trainings that have occurred so far related to principal effectiveness, and if there are superintendents out there listening to this today, if your principals have participated in any of these trainings, they should count as artifacts toward their evaluation. There are especially in Domain 2, instructional leadership, there are specific criteria within the rubrics that address principals and assistant principals participating in their own professional development. All of these trainings should count as evidence toward their evaluation and should be counted as the training. Phase 2 is the planning phase, and in this phase, principals conduct a self-assessment. And if you're looking for a model for that, if you go to my bottom bullet on this slide, I've got a link to the DOE website. There are actual documents there that are self-assessment documents. You can certainly come up with your own, but if you want to look at some, that have already been developed for you, they're there. The assessment actually informs the discussion where the superintendent and or the evaluator and the principal sit down together to establish goals. We're going to recommend that goal setting should be completed no later than mid-October. I think the mid-October date allows for opportunities for principals and superintendents to meet with leadership teams and study all the available data, any assessments that you have, whether they're academic type assessments, maybe they're surveys you've conducted with your community or with your staff, but it really gives you an opportunity to gather all that data together. And again, just a reminder that there are forms available. I'm going to take this a little bit farther and suggest that if you started the process in the spring of looking at the data that you already have, you could start having that goal-setting conversation even in the spring, so that you have plenty of time. Phase 3 is the perform phase, and this really takes place over the course of the school year. This is where the principal is implementing the plan. You know, he or she and the evaluator have come together, they've set a goal, and hopefully come up with some strategies to achieve that goal. During the course of this phase, which is throughout the school year, there are formative reviews and collaborations. We recommended this summer, and I would strongly recommend this. This isn't just the burden of the principal to come up with a book of artifacts to present to his or her evaluator. Hopefully, the evaluator is out there observing events that serve also as artifacts and meeting with principals. I've talked to many superintendents who've said, Katie, I meet with our principals once a week or once a month, and we'll be discussing all of this when we meet on those regular bases. So just some things to think about there. The idea that the superintendent or the evaluator is out there also collecting evidence as well as the principal. It's recommended in the model itself that you would meet on a quarterly or mid-cycle to review the process, that you would sit down with your principals or your assistant principals quarterly or mid-cycle to have a discussion about what have you collected so far, what is your progress toward the goal, how are things going. I know one process I used when I was still in Rapid City and I was evaluating our principals, and I piloted this process, I found it a lot easier to focus on certain components during certain quarters. So we would agree that during quarter one, we were really going to focus on the evaluation part from component or from domains 4 and 5, for example. And we would really focus on collecting the artifacts and the data, and we would almost get that part of the eval completed during quarter one. It wouldn't be finalized, but a lot of the work toward that component or those components would have been completed during quarter one. And then quarter two, we moved on to another component, just to make it manageable and to develop a better understanding. And then phase 4 is the progress phase, and that's where the evaluation cycle comes to a close. The principal finalizes the artifacts and the school growth data, and the evaluator gathers all the evidence and pulls it together to assign a summative principal effectiveness rating. And again, I'm going to caution here, if I were a superintendent or an assistant superintendent and I were still evaluating principals, I wouldn't be waiting until the end to be pulling all those together and to be pulling my thoughts together in terms of assigning, especially the professional practice rating. I know it'll be hard to maybe do the student growth rating until you have some more till you have more data toward the end of the year, but you could certainly be completing that professional practice piece as you go along. And then the principal and the evaluator meet to review the summative evaluation, and that's where you can start that discussion about goals for the next school year, because whatever growth has occurred during the school year should be the basis for the goals for the upcoming school year. I'm going to stop here and ask Matt if any questions have come forward. And so I'll pause here for just a few seconds to give you an opportunity if you want to type in some questions about any of these phases. And then I'm gonna move a little more quickly here because it's 4:25 and I want to have some time on those growth goals that we talked about. All we've done here is we've created a graphic so that if you didn't want to go through that narrative that I just went through and you just wanted to be able to see quick and dirty, here's the process and the dates or the recommended times. Here's a simple graphic to look at. All right, I want to get to the goal development. So just some questions that you need to think about when you're looking at writing the growth goal based on AMO and SPI. To what degree do you, as a principal and a superintendent, become involved in the fall data retreat? And if you don't have a data retreat, how do you work with your leadership team to look at data in order to establish student achievement goals? Because certainly your student achievement goal should be a basis for your principal growth goal. What student growth goal might you develop that reflects and is aligned with what you've learned about your school at the data retreat? What about your SLOs? How do the goals your teachers have established through the SLO process align with your building goals? are you aligning, really the bottom line here is, are you aligning your principal effectiveness growth goal to the building goals? They should all go together toward the same purpose. In addition to looking at your SBAC data, what other local assessments do you have or data that you gather locally that might influence your principal effectiveness student growth goal? Because I want to remind you that while you do have to consider the results of the SBAC, if you collect some type of local assessment data that is in line with the SBAC, you should be looking at that as well. So this next question, if you have other local assessments, do any of them drill down more deeply to the standards related data? We know that with the SBAC, we can go to the claims level. So do you have some type of local assessment that once you look at that claims level of data, you can dig more deeply into your own local assessments to write your growth goal? And then considering question number 6, here's another piece. Will you develop a broad goal for your principal growth goal or a more specific goal? Either would be acceptable. And I'm going to show you some samples of both here in just a few minutes. And when you look at your SBAC data, are you laying it out and then looking at all your other local data and looking at trends? Are you seeing some trends between the SBAC data and your local data that would guide you toward a more relevant and meaningful principal effectiveness student growth goal? And I've given you some ideas here. You could write it could be some factor of AMO or high school completion, attendance, career readiness. And so I'm going to pause just for a second. Matt, are any questions coming in?
We do have a question. It's going to be explained later, but they were just wondering if we could go back and explain how the growth rating, or come to the growth rating and explain how that is calculated again, but that's built in.
I promise you we have a slide for that gives you the formula, but I'm glad you asked the question. Keep asking, because that tells us what we need to make sure that we cover. But we do have a slide with a formula for you coming up. So here are some sample goals. These first 3 on this first slide are all related to the data you would pull from the claims level of the SBAC. And so blank percentage of all students at grade, whatever grade has been assessed and you choose to focus on, will achieve at or near standard or above standard in comprehending a range of increasingly complex literary and informational text. Obviously, you could adjust that for math, and then the percentage is your choice. It doesn't have to be what the state has said you should be showing growth. It could be a percentage you believe is reasonable. A second goal might be a certain percentage of all students at maybe it's multiple grades will achieve at or near standard or above standard in explaining and applying mathematical concepts and interpreting and carrying out mathematical procedures with precision and fluency. The next goal addresses that gap group issue. Maybe you want to focus on your gap group. A certain percentage of students in the gap group at grade whatever will move from below standard to at or near standard when explaining and applying mathematical concepts and interpreting and carrying out mathematical procedures with precision and fluency. So maybe you're looking to bring a certain group up from below standard to a near standard. So you might have a gap group goal. Here are we put in 2 goals, and I want to thank Barb Hansen. She really helped me with this. Maybe your district, and I've heard of this, has chosen your principal student achievement goal to be the goal that the state is putting out there for growth. that you would need to make on a yearly basis over a 6-year period. Doesn't have to be, but we know some districts have chosen to go this route. So a sample goal in that regard might be blank will meet the established AMO target in ELA by increasing the percentage of students scoring at a level 3 or 4 from blank percentage to blank percentage with a 6-year goal of blank percentage. And I'm not going to read the next one. You can see that yourself. But those are ways you could write goals if you wanted to go with what the state is saying you need to do. But you don't have to. I want to emphasize that. Here's a sample attendance goal. Attendance will increase by blank percent among the non-GAP group and by blank percent among the GAP group. And then the last sample goal that I have is maybe you're going to use another district assessment. And remember, if you choose to use a district assessment for your goal, then whatever assessment you're using needs to be in line with the SBAC. So here's an example. 70% of grades 3 through 4 students will meet the RIT projected growth score on the map in reading. And again, you want to make sure that if you have some local or district assessments, that assessment you choose to write your principal's growth goal with aligns in some way with the SBAC data. Here's a sample ACT goal. If you're at the high school level, maybe you want to focus on raising those ACT scores. Here are a couple of graduation goals that you could sample graduation goals that you would want to focus on, one with a cohort group. The other, you maybe want to focus on a GAP group. And we've even written one for the NCRC. We know that's coming on board, that National Career Readiness Assessment. And so here's a goal, because we know that to get points for that assessment, the students have to achieve at the bronze level or higher. Questions on the growth goals before I go to the next slide? Okay. We've had somebody come in who wants us to make a point. And I'm going to let Matt make the point. He took the question here, and he could probably do it more clearly than I can since he has the question in front of him.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind you that if you're at a title school, just title schools, you do need to write both math and ELA goal, which you're aware of. And just wanted you to know that, so if you are at a title school, that you can choose either the math or ELA goal that you created for focus and priority, and that will work. You don't have to go and create another goal.
Yeah, and to clarify that, that doesn't mean you have to have 2 principal effectiveness student growth goals. It's just reminding you that if you're a title school, you had to write 2 goals, and you could choose one of those for your principal effectiveness growth goal. Okay. Now, that question that came up a few minutes ago about how the growth goal and the SLOs are calculated. So here's one of the first slides that addresses that. SLOs account for 75% of the growth rating, and the AMO or SPI growth goal accounts for 25%. And I'm going to show you a chart here in a few minutes that shows you exactly how to calculate that. And not only that, on the DOE website, Matt Gill created a wonderful Excel spreadsheet that does all the math for you. And if you don't already have that, we made everybody aware of that during our fall and June trainings this year. But if you don't have it, and you should be able to find it on the DOE website, but if you have trouble finding it, contact Matt or me. But he's created this really wonderful spreadsheet, and you can plug in the professional practice ratings for each domain and the individual components, and you can plug in the SLO growth score and the AMO or SPI growth score, and that spreadsheet will do all the math for you. And Matt wants to interject there.
Yes, so that is available on the website that I typed into the conversation. I also wanted to let you know that the principal evaluation plan is available within Teachscape now as well, and we are having a training on that on November 5th at 10:30 a.m. Central Time to 12:30 Central Time. So email me if you have questions about that. And we're trying to get it, we're working with Teachscape so that it will do the calculations for you within Teachscape as well. And we're doing the same thing for teacher evaluation as well.
All right, and so here's how you attain the SLO measure. If less than 80% of your teachers earn expected growth, then the SLO growth score for the principal would be low growth. If 80 to 90% of your teachers earn expected growth on their SLO, then principal earns expected growth. And if 91 to 100% of teachers earn expected growth, then principal earns high growth on the SLO measure. On the AMO or SPI, if the school doesn't meet the SPI or AMO goal that the principal set, I've always worried that this slide might be a little confusing. What we mean here is if you, principal, set a growth goal based on SPI or AMO, if your school doesn't meet that goal that you set, not the state goal, but the goal that you and your superintendent set, that's low growth. If you make the SPI or AMO goal that you set with your superintendent, it's expected growth, and then high growth if you significantly exceed the SPI or AMO goal that you set with your superintendent. Someone this summer wanted to know, well, what's significantly exceeded? You'll have to determine that. That'll be up to you in your district. That's between you and your superintendent. Questions? And then here is a chart that shows you how the professional practice rating is determined. If you've attended our trainings previously, you've seen this chart, but it shows how you earn a professional practice rating, and it shows the weights. One of the things that I didn't address in any of the slides previous to this is that if you look at the recommended model, each of the domains carries a certain weight. But however, you as a district can alter those weights if you choose to. And I would recommend that if you want to look more at what the weights are in your Principal Effectiveness Handbook, which is, again, you should have a copy of, because Matt mailed every district a copy this last spring, and it's also available online. You can go in there and see what the domain weights are, and you can alter those. But here is how that is calculated. Here's the calculation for that. And then here's the calculation for the student growth rating. You can see that, like I've already mentioned, the SLO growth is 75% of the total principal student growth rating, and the AMO or SPI is 25% of that total principal student growth rating. And I'm going to pause to see if any questions have come in. And I want to reemphasize that spreadsheet that Matt's developed has all of these calculations in it, and you wouldn't have to do the math. It's done for you in the spreadsheet, but this just gives you a visual. And then finally, the summative rating is arrived at by combining the professional practice rating and the student growth rating. And if you really look at this carefully, as long as a principal or assistant principal earns a proficient or better on his or her professional practice rating, no matter what the student growth rating is, the principal will earn a meets expectations summative rating, a summative score. So I'm going to repeat that. As long as a principal earns a proficient or better on professional practice, he or she is going to earn a meets expectations on the summative rating. And if you look at how that matrix is put together, you can see the 6 gray boxes force that to happen when you come up with the final evaluation, or with the final summative rating. I'm going to pause again to see if any questions have come in. And then here's just another sample. You can see that there are 3 different principals represented here. Principal 1 earned a proficient in professional practice and a high on student growth for a exceeds expectations summative rating. The second principal, that second dot down, earned a proficient rating on professional practice and an expected rating on student growth, and earned a meets expectations. I don't think you need me to go through each one of these with you. You can see how that works. The last principal earned actually a low student growth score, but a proficient professional practice, so again, made that meets expectations for a summative rating. Here's an example, however, of how a principal could earn a less than proficient rating. If he or she earned a basic professional practice rating and an expected student growth, the summative rating would be still meets expectations, but if the principal earned a low student growth and a basic professional practice, you're going to see that principal is going to slide into that below expectation summative rating. And I'm going to pause again to see if any questions have come in. One last slide. I put up a link to get to the DOE website where there are multiple tools available. And that really is the conclusion of the webinar, but we want to open it up once more. If you're still with us, I know we're a little bit over our time. We had hoped to keep this to 30 minutes, but we want to give you a chance to ask questions. So we're going to open it up once more for questions. I wonder if we should unmute. All right, Matt just unmuted everybody. Or if you're more comfortable just asking the question rather than typing it in. The floor is open. Any questions out there? If you once we finish the webinar, if you have some questions, please feel free to call or email Matt or me. We're more than happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of the fall. We'll see you again in November.